The Cambridge professor Jason Arday's unlikely ascent has come to a tragic end. Even before the push alert about his resignation from the University of Cambridge this week, Jason Arday might as well have been the world's most famous living sociologist. In early 2023, Arday received a professorship at Cambridge. At 37, he was the youngest black scholar ever to have done so, and his appointment made international news. A year later, he set out to sell his memoir, according to a cover letter that his agent sent to publishers at the time. Arday's book, to be titled Great and Unfortunate Things, would be an awe-inspiring tale of near-mythic proportions. That now appears to be an understatement. Arday's story was indeed astonishing. As a toddler, he was diagnosed with autism and developmental delays. As we learned the other day, the diagnoses that he claimed to have did not exist at the time he specified being given them. His autism diagnosis was specifically Asperger's, which was not a diagnosis until the early 90s. He didn't fully speak until the age of 11. He learned to read and write only as an adult. Arday's parents are Ghanaian immigrants, and he grew up wearing homemade clothes and hustling for cash by playing snooker. Yet, in spite of all these obstacles and many, many others he has recounted over the years, Arday found a way to go to university and then to graduate school. Eventually, he got his PhD and then became a star. We are so lucky to have you. We remember that interview with the Hillary Creeman lady, Creeman herself, over, oh my god, I have the best black pet in the world, let's go. You are the best in the world in terms of the research that you do. But in the past 2 weeks, Arday's near mythic, or perhaps purely mythic, tale has disintegrated. In July, a philosopher named Nathan Cofnas published a long Substack post reviewing apparent evidence of plagiarism in Arday's academic work. And we read this Substack. I didn't read the writer's name, so that's why the name didn't stick out to me, but we read that Substack. That was the one that I praised for having so much fucking information and showing all of the, like, highlighted direct plagiarizations as well as paraphrasings taken from other people's papers. And there were people on Twitter who were like, Arday's death is entirely Nathan Cofnas' fault. He has blood on his hands. No, the only man with blood on his hands is Arday. And maybe you could make an argument, all of the people who gassed this retard up and allowed him to continuously lie on end. Cofnas posted 36 passages from Arday's 2015 dissertation about student teaching, which reproduce or closely track text found in a 2009 dissertation from another scholar in the field, Paula Zwozdiak-Myers. Arday looks to even have copied from and rearranged Zwozdiak-Myers' title, and in doing so, to have misused an apostrophe. Arday's grad school alma mater, Liverpool John Moores University, which first received direct complaints about the dissertation last fall, did its own investigation and cleared Arday of wrongdoing. A confidential procedure was conducted, the university told me in a statement, me being not me, but the guy writing this article. Professor Arday's PhD still stands, but some of Arday's other academic papers had potential problems too, and they seemed much worse than the mere borrowing of language. Quotes from structured interviews that Arday claimed to have performed closely resembled those used by other researchers. Parts of some interview responses also reappeared across different studies under Arday's name, attributed to different people. This duplication, if deliberate, would be something other than plagiarism. It would be academic fraud. The website Retraction Watch reports that 2 of Arday's papers were quietly corrected. Yesterday, Cambridge announced that it had begun an investigation following new information about Professor Arday's academic qualification. By yesterday, this was about a week ago. By the end of the day, Arday had resigned. I want to reclaim some peace, some privacy, and some semblance of an ordinary life, he said in a statement. I no longer wish to feel as though I am living under a constant spotlight, where every aspect of my life is subject to public examination and judgment. I mean, yeah, that can suck sometimes, but if you're not constantly lying about everything, it's a lot less stressful than it could be, buddy boy. Arday did not respond to questions from The Atlantic, but he told The Times last week that he is not a liar or a fantasist, and that he's been given insufficient supervision as a graduate student. Especially in light of his learning disabilities? How the fuck are you gonna complain about that shit while you're a sitting professor? What the fuck? It's more likely that I've made a mistake. There's a clerical error. It's not that I've fabricated this fucking piece of work. Holy shit. He also seemed to address such allegations at a conference in April for the British Sociological Association, where he gave a talk about pervasive efforts to discredit black scholars, including himself. How convenient is that? Everything I've ever said and done is nothing but a fabrication or a lie or a smudging of the truth. But questioning it, that's a pervasive effort to discredit black scholars. That's race. How dare you? How dare you, you bigot, question all the lies that I've told? These people are brilliant, perversely brilliant, he told his colleagues. There are times when you look at what they're doing and you say to yourself, well done, well played, very good. You've caught me in 1,000 knots. How do I get myself out of this situation? By not creating those knots in the first place? By not lying? It's actually very easy to get out of the situations if the truth is on your side. Even if some damage is dealt, unfortunately, when we get into like cancel culture bullshit, if the truth is on your side, more people will end up supporting you. This much is true. Some of the people who were going after Arday had a political agenda. Cofnas, the philosopher who put Arday's dissertation through a plagiarism checker last month, argues for a hereditarian revolution based on the idea that innate differences in intelligence and other traits exist across racial groups. What? So that journalist guy is now actually a philosopher, and there's an issue that he pointed out all of Arday's lies because there's whatever the fuck a hereditarian revolution. Like, that sounds like some Scientology weirdness. I don't know what that is. Article author's barely hidden point of view. He also claims that the humanities and much of the social sciences have been slain on the altar of DEI. Well, I mean, he's right about that. 100% fucking right about that. But the challenges to Arday's credibility quickly went beyond the realm of Cofnas and his fellow white reactionaries. Chat is not lying and completely fabricating every feat you've done in your life to be fraudulently given a PhD and a professorship. Is that actually the correct way to do things? Is calling out liars white supremacy? What? Why did they have to specify white reactionaries? Isn't it just people that want the truth and fair treatment? He is not a black scholar, he is a black fraudster. And if anyone should be calling him out, it would be the actual intelligent black scholars, would it not? Because him being elevated to a position and even treated better than that other black scholar that we read about the other day, who went through fucking hell for daring to publish something that goes against the leftist narrative, he's going to make everyone more incredulous of anyone black in a position of professorship. Now, that shouldn't happen, but that is kind of what human perception is like. They see something and they're just like, well, now I have to be incredulous of all people. And it's like, well, no, you don't. But that's just what human brains do. They're white, so they have to point that out. It's so fucking crazy. This whole thing, they've tried to racialize it at every fucking corner. And it's like the only racialization in this from the beginning were the people that fast-tracked this idiot through all of these positions and gave him all these accolades and opportunities that he was not entitled to and did not deserve simply because of his race. And beyond familiar arguments about diversity hiring, taken all together, they exposed a broader self-destructive tendency that has long been present in our universities, and also in the media and publishing. Any failing can be forgiven as long as it's packaged in a story that people want to hear. So you agree with the guy, but you have to phrase it in a way that you don't agree with the white reactionaries? Like, what? What are we doing? What are we doing, dude? The absolute panic around this guy suggests there's an academic pipeline they don't want discovered. Oh, there absolutely fucking is. And I cannot wait to see how many people are in these, like, institutional positions and education places that have prestige that just do not belong there, that have lied to get into their positions. Great and Unfortunate Things, which Arday co-wrote with Eve Claxton, that's the first time I've heard that name, is still scheduled to come out next week from Simon & Schuster. The story that it tells should not be taken at face value. It differs notably from other versions of his life that Arday has shared in public and in private, including in the original proposal he sent out with his agent. But the book is also, in a way, very honest and quite telling. It provides a vivid portrait of a man who was always manifestly ill-equipped for academia, yet found a way to reach its upper levels. Found a way. Just keep lying, and people will keep elevating you based on your race. This is not someone else's cruel assessment of Arday's tragic and improbable career, it's his own. The memoir begins with a prophecy. It's 2006, and Jason Arday, then 21 years old, is installing water pumps in the favelas of Brazil. The rest of the book is an elaboration on this moment. Arday suffers, Arday overcomes. The doctors who assessed him as a toddler told his mother that there's no one in there and that he was no better than a vegetable. I mean, to be fair, this is actually kind of true. If he's lied about literally everything he's done and therefore has genuinely accomplished nothing except taking away opportunity from other people, well, a vegetable in that case is actually better than him because at least you can get nutrients from the vegetable. All this guy does is ruin other people. Even his speech therapist wasn't optimistic that he'd ever learn to talk. At one point, she also physically abused him, the memoir says. Yeah, I just don't believe that. As a boy, Arday rocked and hummed and banged his head until he bled. He slammed cupboard doors and smeared feces on the walls. Yet still, eventually, he started to verbalize. Still, eventually, he made his way through school. Tribulations piled up throughout his life. Arday is nearly deaf in one ear. He's dyslexic. He finds simple math befuddling. He has marked difficulties with memory, reading, and processing skills. As a teen, he was beaten so severely by a group of kids his age that he became an epileptic. To make his way through secondary school, while, by his own account, illiterate, he needed ample help. Support assistants who sat beside him in class and took notes on his behalf. I was just like, none of this is true. If he actually had any kinds of like processing or intellectual issues, he would not be able to lie this much and even keep the majority of the stories as straight as he had. Like, yeah, there's been a couple of inconsistencies, but like none of this shit has happened. When Arday applied to university, his girlfriend, Debs, this is the first time we hear about a girlfriend, by the way, who had been teaching him to read, wrote out the application on his behalf, including the personal statement. In university, a friend who took the same courses sat beside him, sharing notes. She's the only reason I survived university, he says. Why would you do this? Why would you I knew a guy that did this for his girlfriend as well, because she was basically like empty-headed, could do nothing on her own. And so he did like all of her college assignments for her and got her her degree. And it's just like, this is not helping her because now she's going to go out into the workforce and get a job in her field and not be able to do it competently. You're not helping someone by doing this. By the time Arday started on his master's degree, he writes, he was reading at about the same level as his 3-year-old daughter. Still, he pressed onward. Somehow, he got a teaching job. Like, there's just no way. There's no fucking way. His obstacles were only multiplying, though. Money was tight, so after each day of teaching, Arday writes, he had to work an overnight shift in a supermarket from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and then a morning shift as a cleaner from 5:30 to 7:30. The only time he had left to write his dissertation was when he was commuting between London, where he lived, and Liverpool, where he taught. On those semi-weekly 5-hour rides, the book explains, he would open up his laptop on the plastic seatback table and start typing out his thesis, Hunt and Peck style. When did he have time to sleep? When was this man sleeping? As his dissertation deadline approached, Arday started having blurry vision and medical scans revealed a brain tumor. After it was removed, he had a mini stroke and lost his short-term memory. I'd worked on my thesis for over 30 months and now I was reading it as if for the first time, he writes. As one might expect, his thesis defense did not go smoothly. One examiner was suspicious of his work. I'm struggling to see that there's any original contribution here, she said, according to the book. But Arday, who often likened himself to Rocky Balboa, managed to fight back, and in the end, he passed. Wow. Truly an anime protagonist for the ages. The memoir brings up the fictional boxer in about a dozen different contexts. More troubles follow in the years ahead. Arday's brain tumor returns, he splits up with his wife, he suffers autistic burnout during the coronavirus pandemic and can't even get out of bed. He decides to kill himself by jumping off a bridge. It's a beautiful view. But at the very last minute, he listens to his favorite song, Take It to the Limit, delaying his attempt just long enough for a member of his family to rescue him. In the end, he writes, my decision to listen to the Eagles likely saved my life. It's just like any one of these lies in isolation could very much have happened. But when you start stacking a million different lies and literally everything you've done is a fabrication, no one can take anything you say seriously. He's writing a screenplay, but he's bad at it. The book sticks mostly to this frantic register, and coincidence abounds. Arday claims, for instance, that when the kids who beat him up at the bus stop were arrested, he told the judge they shouldn't go to prison. Then, years later, when he took a brief teaching job at an unnamed London university, two of the muggers, a hard R, brave today. Turned out to be his students. They'd been so moved by his act of mercy that they'd turned their lives around. And now they were coaching other at-risk youth. Both of them gave me a hug, which I returned, he writes. One asked Arday to be the godfather of his child. Is that really true? I reached out to the book's fact checker to ask whether this and several other stories from the book had been verified, but she did not respond. How does the book have a fact checker? What? Even asking that question places me on the wrong side of Arday's moral ledger. Again and again, the book acknowledges his impossible success, yet his indignation at anyone who ever doubted him remains a running theme throughout the book. These are Arday's villains, the Ivan Dragos and the Clubber Langs of academia, who dared to wonder whether his work was really so original, or questioned whether he did it on his own. He swallowed his feelings of offense, he says, in reference to one lecturer who insisted on drilling him about subject material in person, but I have never forgotten them. When you succeed against pretty much insurmountable odds, Arday writes in the book, it weirdly makes people question your credibility. That's not weird at all, actually. Is it weird? I don't think it's weird. When you keep succeeding against insurmountable odds, the facts of your surmounting will be bound to get a second look. Arday's record of public statements include plenty that would seem to be exaggerated, if not completely false. He said repeatedly, for instance, that he'd once run 300 miles. We already know about this. He conceded that he'd done this as a part of a fundraising syndicate. In an interview, he claimed that he'd originally been part of the BBC series Up, which began filming before he was born. Though this was later said to have been an analogy, not a literal description. Oh, yeah. But the most disturbing inconsistencies arise from Arday's book Proposal, a copy of which was obtained by The Atlantic. That document from 2024 cites several accolades of which no proof exists online. The proposal also lays out many of the same events as the memoir, but with slightly different dates or details. Next is the part where he builds a lightsaber and throws the ring into Mount Doom. I'm waiting for it, honestly. Apparently they had 2 children. What the fuck? Guy gets caught in his massive web of lies. It's not even a web, it's like a catacomb of lies at this point. And has kids and still offs himself. Talk about not being able to take any accountability. Maybe he was a real woman. The boys who beat him up were not his age, but 4 years older. His suicide attempt happened before, not during, the pandemic. And whereas the book describes Arday as having survived 2 brain tumors, the proposal says he had a bout of testicular cancer. No reference to that illness appears in the memoir. Nor does the book describe the time that Arday, when a teenager, was struck by a car and spent several months in a coma. According to the book proposal, the doctors told his parents that he would never recover and suggested taking him off life support as an act of mercy. Through all of this, he was aware of everything that was going on because he had locked-in syndrome. As I will describe to readers in the book, Arday wrote in the proposal, these months afforded me another profoundly different way of perceiving the world. The book doesn't describe any of this, nor that he awakened miraculously from the coma, nor the full year he spent relearning everything, how to walk, how to talk. Instead, the memoir tells us only that he spent those months finishing his final year of secondary school and taking his exams. I was relieved, beyond relieved, the memoir states, when those were done. The way that this is written, it makes it sound like he said he spent the months that he had locked-in syndrome finishing his final year of school and taking exams. That's so weird. Then there's the prophecy, the revelation Arday was given in Brazil that he would suffer greatly and also do great things. According to the proposal, this occurred in 2005, not 2006, and the message came not from a local aid worker in her 30s, but from an elder in the small town where I had been assigned, who was well known in the area for predicting people's futures. Can't even keep a single story fucking straight, dude. What the fuck? Didn't you know he was a master of astral projection? Later in the proposal, he calls this person a shaman woman. Do you know the story of Spartacus? This is Sparta, he says. Spartacus, the escaped slave who led a rebellion against the Romans, this town elder asks before telling him his fate in minute detail. Every event she described, Arday writes in proposal, has since come to pass. I reached out to Arday's editors, Don Davis in the US and Chris Doyle, who's publishing the book with Simon and Schuster UK, to ask them why the 3-month coma and the shaman woman hadn't made the cut in the published version of the book, and to find out what they thought of his other inconsistencies in Arday's story, and the allegations of misconduct in his academic work. Neither of them chose to answer my questions. I also tried to reach Eve Claxton, who co-wrote the book with Arday, and whom he describes in the acknowledgements as one of the most important people I've ever met in my life. by phone and text. She did not respond. Arday's book agent, Jennifer Gates, the one who described his life story as near mythic, did not respond to multiple emails. A spokesperson for Simon & Schuster would only say that the company is proceeding with publication next week. I'm noticing something here. Every single person working with him on any book is a woman. Like, Chris Doyle could, I guess, be a man, but I've never seen Chris spelled K-R-I-S for a male. That's typically a female spelling. Dawn Davis, that sounds like a fucking woman. That sounds like a woman, bro. Eve Claxton, that's a woman's name. Jennifer Gates, that's a woman's name. That's a gay Chris. Eat hot chip and lie, you know? I'm noticing a pattern here. Perhaps it's fitting that the book's release is still on track and that it even has been designated as an editor's pick on Amazon. Once again, Arday is succeeding in the face of many obstacles, uplifted by the many angels in his life, and given the opportunity to do great things. Can you imagine what life would be like if only you had been born black? The levels of privilege that you would get to experience are insane. This was the true miracle of his career, that the system could be bent to meet his needs, and then it could be bent a little further, and bent until it fit the wild arc of a fairy tale. By his own account, Arday rose to fame as a scholar and a writer despite staggering limitations. He became an academic who can read only a single page of academic text an hour and cannot comprehend what is happening at work 90% of the time. You have to have the right skin color, and then you have to just suck up to the people who only care about skin color, and then you can do anything. His mission as a scholar had always been to help ensure that other disadvantaged academics could have access to the same allowances that he had had. What a horrific thing to read. Like, if that was his mission and his goal, thank God that that's not gonna happen. And that they'd be empowered to make use of them. He wanted others to succeed the way he had, through lies and fraud. The fuck is wrong with you, buddy? Today, in academic circles, that's what I'm known for, he writes in his proposal. Everybody says Jason is the guy that teaches everyone the tricks. I wonder if, like, some part of him actually started genuinely believing in his lies because of all the disingenuous DEI acolytes gassing him up all over the place. Instead of anyone like taking him to task or trying to point out, hey, maybe you need to word this in another way, right? Everyone who like directly was like, give me some sources, give me some proof, he just attacked them. He said he'd call the police. He said it was harassment and bullying. He said it was racism. If anyone on his own side even tried to minutely point out, hey, you need some more sources for this, I wonder if it would have helped curb some of his delusions. There's a moment near the end of Great and Unfortunate Things when Arday's confidence begins to waver. He's filling out his application for the professorship at Cambridge, and just then, as he draws to the brink of destiny, doubt begins to fill his mind. What if I have completely overestimated my capabilities, he writes. What if my story ends up being a cautionary tale like Icarus, flying too close to the sun? It's incredibly disingenuous to compare himself to Icarus. I think like, yeah, I guess you could make an argument of like, yeah, he had too much ego and that's what brought him down. But like, it wasn't pure ego. It was built on lies. Like, at least Icarus had been flying up until that point, right? Icarus was more sane. This article, I guess, had some more information about the guy who exposed Arday. Accusations against Arday surfaced last month from former Cambridge philosophy researcher Nathan Cofnas, who published a Substack article alleging that Arday was a known plagiarist and fabulist for more than a year, and much of his personal biography was questionable. I'm disappointed that Jason Arday resigned. He was hired by Cambridge to be the face of DEI, and he was doing a great job, Cofnas told Fox News Digital. Cofnas first expressed doubt about Arday's background after the educator said he had been nonverbal until age 11 and practically illiterate until 18, while still being able to get a PhD in 2015 and become the youngest black professor at Cambridge University in 2023. Arday's appointment in 2023 received massive media attention, with much of it celebrating it as a landmark moment. I genuinely don't remember hearing about this guy. And I feel like, of all people, considering how deep I get into the DEI trenches, if this was like massive media attention, I should have heard about it. Like, maybe I did and I covered like a tiny article, but I genuinely don't remember. And Cofnas added to Fox News Digital, however, given that he's gone, a number of people have suggested that his professorship should be given to me. If the Cambridge administration could arrange this, it would go a long way toward restoring trust in higher education. Cofnas was ousted from Cambridge in 2024 amid criticism of his writing that blacks would almost completely disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sports and entertainment in a world of full meritocracy.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
No wonder he was invested in this fraudulent professor case. God damn! That's fucking crazy! I was originally, like, gonna be super fucking incredulous, because this is a really weird thing to say, right? It's a really weird thing to be like, hey, you know, now that he's gone, maybe you could give his professorship to me, the guy who exposed him. Like, that's a little strange, but reading this part, how he got ousted, alright, I understand it, buddy. I understand. Holy fuck, he said it with his chest! Holy shit. Why would Professor Plagiarism make such outlandish claims? Dr. Max Pemberton has been a psychiatrist for 20 years. Here, he examines Jason Arday's stories and says there's one condition that could explain everything. Why lie? I don't mean the small social lies that keep things running smoothly, but what appear to be enormous ones. Invented academic posts, fabricated childhood feats of endurance that never happened. And having decided to lie, why choose stories so extravagant that they invite disbelief and so specific that anybody with a spare afternoon and an internet connection can take them apart? These are questions I've been asked about Jason Arday, who resigned last week from his position as a professor of sociology education at Cambridge, after the university announced an investigation into his qualifications. He denies being a liar, and he has explanations for his claims about endurance running and fundraising. And when Liverpool John Moores University examined plagiarism allegations against his 2015 doctorate, they were not upheld. Nothing has been proved against him, and the investigations remain open. I should say that I've never met Jason Arday, and so I have no idea what has been going on in his mind, or how much truth there may or may not be in his life story. But having spent 20 years as a psychiatrist listening to people who tell me things that turn out not to be true, I can speak generally about why people find themselves in these sorts of situations, because the pattern is well established. There is an old descriptive psychiatric term, pseudologia fantastica, coined in the 1890s for people whose lies are elaborate, sustained, and built around a fantasized version of themselves rather than for obvious material gain. You may think that hardly fits here, given the story apparently brought Jason Arday a professional chair, several honorary doctorates, and he claimed a $1.4 million book deal. But the gain is usually a byproduct of this pattern of behavior rather than the object, and you can usually tell this from the type of lies. Someone who, for instance, wants a certain job often embroiders their qualifications, but they stop there, as anything beyond that is pure risk, and tall tales about marathons they've run, funds they've raised, and desperate childhood they've endured do little for a selection panel, except draw questions that up the chance of being caught out. The people I've met who fit the description of pseudologia fantastica tend to not stop lying. They are seldom cold or calculating. They tend to be charming and, perhaps most importantly, fragile underneath. What strikes me most is how often they appear to half believe the story they've invented. The lie is not really being told to the listener at all. It's being told to the ego of the person telling it. The listener is only there to confirm it. Lying, I think, starts with the memory, which is not really a straightforward recording of life's experiences, more a reconstruction of events. Every time we remember or retrieve something from our memory, we rebuild it and return it slightly altered. All of us do this because in our minds we tend to shift to the version of ourselves we want to be. Someone comfortable in their own skin has little to gain from the process, so the edits stay small. Someone who's not comfortable will find that each retelling shaves away a little more of the person they cannot stand being. By the time a story has been told 200 times, it has not only been changed, but rehearsed so much, it eventually begins to feel like a real memory. The stories are hardly ever straightforward boasts of success either, because someone who simply claims to be clever or rich invites envy. And envy is not what these people are looking for. This is fascinating. Instead, the tales are about suffering that has been overcome, odds that were insurmountable, the diagnosis nobody believed, the childhood that should not have been survived, and then the triumph over all of this. It is a far more effective structure for any fantasy because it makes doubting it feel like an act of cruelty. That's a little crazy. It also, the structure our whole culture of aspiration is built on. The one that fills memoirs and TED Talks and the backstories on TV talent shows. This is why anyone constructing an identity out of borrowed material will reach for the template. It's that stuff of fairy tales and legends, the struggle in the face of adversity, a struggle that demonstrates positive things about an individual's personality and inner character. I once saw a man, and I have changed key details that might identify him, who had claimed to the woman he married that he was a barrister. He left the house in a suit every morning and came home with stories about court. What struck me was that he could not tell me exactly when he had decided to lie. There had been a conversation at a party where somebody misheard him and he did not correct them. It's easy to see how that can happen. It was a series of slow, incremental lies that built and built. Each time he got positive feedback from those around him and he embellished a little more, each time the feedback provided a sort of affirmation until the story had grown into something unrecognizable from where it started. This just seems like a weak-willed individual, right? Like, if someone says something about me, whether it's positive or negative, and it's not true, I want to correct that. And I feel like that's the normal human response, wanting to correct things that are an inaccuracy. Leaning into the inaccuracy for the sake of, like, affirmations just feels like a weak-willed individual thing. Like, they need more external validation, and so they're willing to let people believe lies about themselves. It was after this he met his future wife and had to double down on the deception. When I saw him, he had spent almost a decade maintaining a fictional life that had begun with an innocuous misunderstanding at a party. There's a neurological basis for this. Researchers at University College London put volunteers in a scanner and let them lie for their own benefit. They found the amygdala, an area of the brain that derives emotional response to wrongdoing, lit up strongly at the first lie, and then less after each one. The size of that fading response predicted the size of the next lie. Our brain starts to extinguish that awkward, guilty feeling. The guardrails that prevent us living out a fantasy are easily moved by incremental falsehoods. So what makes people not listen to the guardrails is the question, right? Like, why do the stories become so extravagant? Part of it is this notion that an audience gets used to them, just as the exponent of the lie does. So what produced gasps last year produces only nods this time, and applause that has stopped coming leaves an empty feeling. So the story has to grow, and it grows in whatever direction was rewarded most loudly the last time. You can't backtrack once a story is out there. You can only embellish and elaborate. Or you can just retell the story the way that it happened. You don't have to embellish. You don't have to elaborate and add details that didn't exist before. I was like, maybe sometimes people's memories are faulty. They forgot things during a first retelling. That's possible. But, like, there's no reason to just, like, add new shit for no reason. Why make up stories that are so easily disproved? A con man would never behave like this, as the object is to get away with it. The fanaticist is running no calculation at all, as there is no auditor or moderator in their head. The only person they picture on the other side of the story is somebody looking impressed. A claim is not weighted for whether it will survive scrutiny, it is weighted for whether it will trigger the required impression and response. The claims that do best in that regard are precisely the ones nobody sensible would invent. That's fair. That's fair. And it's like, it's a struggle to, like, think about this mindset as well. Because it's like, obviously it's a mental health issue, so, like, they can't help it. They're, like, driven to do it by the mental health condition. But it's just like, it makes so many more problems for yourself. Holy fuck, how do you even address this kind of mental health issue? Every fantasist I've known kept going with their stories long past the point where anybody was still convinced, because the alternative was to confess it was a sham and allow people to destroy the false identity they had built for themselves. So, become a nobody. Which is why I don't feel triumphant about Jason Arday's downfall. When a world collapses, it's a terrible thing to live through, and no less terrible for having been constructed of tissue paper. He built it and must answer for it, but he did not build it on his own. And the institutions, not least Cambridge University and the DEI industry, that made him their poster boy and handed him the bricks have gone very quiet. For that, they bear considerable responsibility in the sorry saga and should reflect on it in shame. This is pretty much exactly my opinion. Like, Arday is fully responsible for his own lies and his own death. However, you can make the argument that these Cambridge DEI acolyte fuckwits were willing to prop up all of his lies in order to have the perfect pet that they wanted. And it's disgusting that they would do that. DEI is dangerous for everyone, and it should never be lauded as a good thing. Jason Arday's family says campaign of misinformation was too much for him. Surely they mean his campaign of lies and misinformation he told other people, right? Surely the family's not attacking the people exposing his lies as the misinformation peddlers. Surely.
Wrong.
The family of former University of Cambridge professor Jason Arday said that they are in shock to have lost this amazing father, partner, brother, uncle, and son, adding the campaign of misinformation was too much for Jason, who was a gentle man and who always wanted to see the best in everyone. We are in shock to have lost this amazing father, partner, brother, uncle, and son, and we won't comment further at this point beyond asking the press to leave us alone now and to stop the campaign of harassment which has been waged against Jason and his family for too long. The family should be deported. They are clearly unable to assimilate into British culture, and they are willing to prop up lies that this man told about his entire life. Deport the whole family. Get them out. They do not belong in Britain. University of Cambridge Vice Chancellor Professor Deborah Prentice said, "We are desperately saddened to hear this tragic news. Our heartfelt sympathies go to Jason Arday's family and friends at this incredibly difficult time." Education Secretary Lucy Powell has said that she was deeply shocked and saddened to hear about the death of Jason Arday, as she urged people to remember there are real people with loved ones involved. With the amount of lies this guy told, I'm basically imagining like a black male version of my mother. And so it's very disorienting to see people be like, oh, this is such a heartfelt tragedy and he was such a wonderful man. No, he was filled with lies and deception. And he didn't care what opportunities he took away from deserving people as long as he was still getting attention and accolades. Education Secretary Lucy Powell has said that she was deeply shocked and saddened to hear about the death of Jason Arday, as she urged people to remember there are real people with loved ones involved. Why did she say remember there are real people? Was Jason Arday not real? Did I predict him being someone else's fucking college dissertation? She wrote on X, "I'm deeply shocked and saddened to hear about the death of Jason Arday. Jason was subjected to a campaign of sustained abuse for more than 3 years since he accepted the role of professor at Cambridge University by those who would leave no stone unturned in their quest to undermine him. Because he didn't deserve to be a professor. He had no qualifications. He had no accreditations. He was a fraud. In all senses." A spokesperson for the Metropolitan Police said police were called by the London Ambulance Service at 3:12 p.m. on Friday, August 14th, following a report that a man had been found unresponsive inside a property on Daley Thompson Way, SW8. Sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers. At this time, his death is being treated as unexpected, but is not believed to be suspicious. The case is being investigated by officers from the Met Central South Command Unit. A file will be prepared by the coroner. Bill Ribeiro Addy, the Labour MP for Clapham and Brixton Hill, criticized the University of Cambridge for its handling of allegations around Professor Arday's conduct. Miss Ribeiro Addy told Sky News the university has a number of questions to answer. They appointed him, they celebrated him, and then when a media pile-on began, they not only investigated him and exonerated him, but they decided that they would investigate him again. They have a lot to bear in terms of what has happened here. I was about to agree with this lady, but it seems like she's blaming the university for adding to the pile-on, which is fucking crazy. She's like, how dare you investigate this man? Claim that he's innocent and then investigate him again. Well, it's like, yeah, why did you lie the first time? Fucking retard university people. Again, anyone involved in appointing Arday to any kind of professorship position should be fired and should have their credentials completely fucking yoinked. Because an investigation into those people's credentials will probably also find a metric fuck ton of fraud. All of these people should be looked into and be fired at a bare minimum. Joe Maugham, executive director of Good Law Project, whose website Professor Arday posted a letter on saying he was resigning from the University of Cambridge, said Arday's death is a tragedy for him and those who loved him. He added, those around him had been warning the media that this was a risk. It was one reason why I refused to join those condemning him. No. Much like when someone threatens to kill themselves if you break up with them, if someone is threatening to kill themselves if you expose their lies about their credentials and how they are a fraud, you don't give in to that. And I do not understand what the public interest was in continuing to hound him after he resigned as a professor. And I do not understand what the risk assessments media outlets did. What the fuck do you mean? You don't understand what the public interest was in continuing to hound him after he resigned? Because someone who built their entire career on fraud and was given so many opportunities, thus erasing opportunities for people who deserved to be there, the public has a huge fucking interest in knowing how deep and far the lies went and how many people enabled him and gave him accolades and positions he was not entitled to have. That is the public interest, you disingenuous, cowardly scumfuck. What the hell am I even reading? I am also aware of calls from some members of our community for an audit of our HR procedures and practices, which I will ask that this review address. I will also stress the importance of this review proceeding at pace and concluding as quickly as possible. In an update on Wednesday, Professor Prentice said that the investigation into Arday's employment will be carried out independently by senior academics from within and beyond Cambridge. I think there should absolutely be a real independent study that Cambridge has no part in setting up. Otherwise, it's just going to be we investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. Fuck you, you're a racist. In a statement, she said, I fully understand the concerns being raised across the university and well beyond it regarding Jason Arday's appointment, and I share them. I know there is anger and anxiety around the damaging and difficult case. We will now investigate the circumstances around his appointment by the Faculty of Education back in 2022 and his time here in Cambridge since appointment nearly 4 years ago. Professor Prentice added, in light of the focus on this troubling case and the widespread commentary around it, I want to be very clear that we do not need the outcomes of an investigation to clearly and loudly affirm that our staff of color are highly valued for their scholarship, their achievements, and the contributions they make to the institution and the wider academic community. I think it's really grotesque and also unironically racist that you can't call out a black individual in academia for being a fraud without first clarifying that I do truly care about all of those suffering with melanation. You know, truly they are our star beings and we must elevate them. Like what? No like white person or Hispanic person or Asian person would get like some pretense glowing affirmations in the face of like, oh, we need to do an investigation, bruh. This particular case is an aberration and should not be used to cast aspersions on their work or the legitimacy of their roles at Cambridge. Professor Priyamvada Gopal, professor of post-colonial studies at Cambridge's English faculty, so another useless person, and one of the signatories who called for an independent inquiry, told the Press Association last week that Arday's case had acted as a gift to people and forces who have been targeting equality, diversity, and inclusion in universities for a long time now. They don't even care that he was actually a fraud. They care that he was exposed and that people against DEI can now use this in their favor. Wow, it's almost like DEI's always been fucking bad and requires lies and obfuscation in order to push through. That's crazy, bruh. Cremiu here posting, Bluesky is already rushing to blame Cofnas instead of the frauds at Cambridge that put Arday in a position to be outed. It's hard to imagine being that contemptuous and wrong, but somehow, every time. And so you have here, holy fucking shit, Jason Arday found dead. Every single article that includes Nathan Cofnas' name as the instigator of this, or they should include his name, he's not an instigator. Exposing fraud is not instigating. It's exposing fraud. He was doing a public service. Here's another one. You know that Cofnas and his ilk are viewing this as a win. Nathan Cofnas is responsible for this man's death, end of story. Now, I think once again, this belies the true intentions of the far leftists. You know that Cofnas and his ilk are viewing this as a win. Someone taking their own life is not a win. I like here, maybe he's only talking about the resignation, which, yeah, that would be a win. Someone who's there fraudulently actually shouldn't even be allowed to resign. They should be fired. I think him being allowed to resign is still a fucking disservice. Someone else saying, Nathan Cofnas wanted very badly to own this guy's firing. Let him own this too. And then he links the Jason Arday found dead. Jesse Singal wrote about him in the New York Times. Last week, I logged into the Other Hell site briefly to look at Tyler Austin Harper's thread for unrelated reasons, and literally all of his tweets are about this guy, whom I genuinely had never heard of before. Even the far lefties had never heard about his supposed monumental appointment in 2023. Apparently, it was nationwide news. Nobody's heard about it. They're projecting they would view it as a win if someone on our side isekai'd themselves. Oh, they absolutely would, which is why I said it belies their true intentions. And it's like, what do you mean let him own this too? Nobody wanted Jason Arday to kill himself. Him killing himself was his decision instead of taking accountability for all of the lies and fraud he has committed. But nobody wanted him dead, and it is always a tragedy when someone takes their own life. Yes, they absolutely are. Let's see. You know that Cofnas and his ilk are viewing this as a win, so that's that one from earlier. Someone quote retweeted that on Bluesky, saying, yes, they absolutely are, and the message this sends to other people of color in academia is we weaponize the press against him, and we can do it against you. I don't understand how some of these people live in such delusion. It's not weaponizing the press to want lies and fraud to be taken seriously. I mean, like, if we want to talk about weaponizing the press, we can go over all of those insane lawsuits that were lodged against Trump that ended up getting thrown out. I mean, if you really want to do that. And the sheer fucking gall of saying that it was the right that weaponized the media against someone. Imagine after the last 15 years. After that fucking long. Are there any more of these screenshots? Because I would like to read more. Cofnas is the one we should have sympathy for. You can't make me apologize for woke 1, I refuse. The only mistake was not going far enough. Maybe if academia was actually turned into a tool for communist indoctrination, we wouldn't be in this fascist hellscape.
Surely you can't be serious.
I feel like it should be a war crime to have to read the opinions of sub-70 IQ people online. Of course, that useless motherfucker Kevin Bird retweeted that. I don't even know who the fuck Kevin Bird is, besides apparently someone incredibly delusional. Arday accused a student of white privilege after she questioned her mark. Jason Arday accused a student of having white privilege after she questioned her marks, it has been claimed. Former University of Cambridge professor who resigned last week amid allegations of dishonesty and academic plagiarism, is alleged to have implied that the student was racist after she complained about a low essay score. The claim was made by a former student who described Mr. Arday's teaching during his 2018 tenure at the University of Roehampton as terrible. The former student described his reaction to being asked for feedback, saying, I now saw a side of him I'd never seen before. Angry, but also scared. Arday implied that I was racist and said that the only reason I wasn't happy with my 70% was due to my white privilege. It raises further questions over the University of Cambridge's decision to appoint Mr. Arday as Professor of Sociology of Education in 2023, given his relative lack of qualifications and published academic work. Writing for the news website Unheard, the former student, who was given the pseudonym Fiona Brown, said Mr. Arday gave her a mark of 70% for the essay, below her average for the year, and she subsequently asked him for a meeting to provide feedback. When she explained her dissatisfaction, she claimed that suddenly his friendly, confident demeanor changed, and he made the accusation of white privilege. He was clearly upset at being questioned. And I ended the meeting as quickly as possible. The student, who said Mr. Arday had left shortly after the interaction, questioned why none of his universities had been prepared to point out that the emperor had no clothes before he joined Cambridge. That's a very good question. Once again, investigate all of those people, investigate their credentials, and then fire them. Some serious soul-searching must surely follow from all the academics who enabled him to climb the academic ladder, she said. Describing Mr. Arday's teaching after he arrived at Roehampton as a senior lecturer in the autumn of 2018, she said the first red flag was his discussions about song lyrics, including the way he'd ramble about Tinny Tempa or Eminem. I don't know who Tinny Tempa is, but that sounds eerily similar to Tony Timpa. Or how black artists like Beyonce were sexualized by white men without offering any evidence to substantiate his claims. I'm gonna say Beyonce is sexualized by fucking everyone. Because Beyonce is a sexy lady. Like, what are we doing here? Fucking Eminem, really? Mr. Arday would also tell his class to discuss clips from the films Fish Tank and Kidulthood without offering guidance on how to do so. It says film, so I'm sure he doesn't mean Sam Hyde's Fish Tank, but I choose to believe that's what he means because it's funnier. She added, and this was if he was even in the classroom at all. He often arrived late and left early, once teaching for a single hour when 4 were scheduled. I can honestly describe Arday's teaching as terrible. He rarely used the PowerPoint slides. Instead, he usually sat casually on a desk, giving his generalized views on racism without ever referring to any academic theories, let alone those relevant to the youth participation and identities module he was supposed to be teaching. You know, this was a great opportunity for those taking this class to realize that all of the DEI shit is just communist gobbledygook. I wonder how many realized by having a DEI teacher that DEI is just bullshit. It'd be very interesting if this was able to break some of the students' programming. The former students in Mr. Arday's class was initially charmed by his teaching and interested in his claims that white people were guilty of every kind of prejudice. Interested in his claims that white people have original sin that no other race carries. However, she said it gradually dawned on us that we were learning nothing of substance and that much of his talk was nonsense, as Mr. Arday continued to fail to turn up for lectures. I do not understand how anyone hears this and gets excited for learning how white people are original sin evil, instead of, hey, wait a minute, I think my teacher might be kind of racist. The latter makes a lot more fucking logical sense. He was a black scholar time. When students took an assessment, he recommended that they answer either of the 2 essay questions that mentioned ethnicity, despite there being 4 options. This, after all, was the only thing he had talked to us about, she said. Mr. Arday was contacted for comment. I'm sure he didn't respond. If Jason Arday were a white middle-class academic, he would not have been hounded by the British press in the way that he was. My thoughts are with his loved ones, may he rest in peace. Not only is this absurdly racist and untrue, but even if he wasn't white, if he was black and didn't have the correct leftist opinions, he would have been hounded by the universities. Like, what are we talking about here? And Jeremy Kaufman points out, in 2020, Mike Adams committed suicide after being canceled and losing his job as a professor. Adams was never dishonest. All he did was say things like rioters are thugs and women's studies aren't essential. Even in his death, the media ran awful headlines like this. Professor who announced retirement after racist and sexist tweets died by suicide. So why is it that the press can mock this white professor for killing himself, for saying rational things he can see with his eyes in society, like rioters are thugs, that is true, women's studies aren't essential, that is just true? Why is it okay to say that? But if anyone is just like, yeah, I don't really care that a fraudster killed himself, somehow that makes them a horrible person. These are the tweets criminology professor Mike Adams faced protests and mass petitions calling for his firing over in 2020. He ultimately lost his job and then killed himself. And he asked, it was Mike Adams indeed, what did he say that he caught flack for? And Grok responded, the immediate 2020 controversy came from several tweets, mocking North Carolina's COVID restrictions after mentioning eating pizza and drinking beer with 6 men. He wrote, I almost felt like a free man who was not living in the slave state of North Carolina. Massacupa, let my people go. I need fucking Sawa to read that with a Massa Moonshine voice. During the George Floyd unrest, rioters don't care about social issues. They are thugs looking for an opportunity to break the law with impunity. Notably, he said rioters, though many reports described this as an attack on Floyd or Black Lives Matter protesters generally. See, and this is exactly what fucking anal violence tried to do in my article. They tried to take the, when you realize most trans activists, speaking about most specifically trans activists, keywords, they tried to transform that into, Kirsche is saying this about all transgender people, when that could not have been further from the truth. This guy, Smirkly, he put together a full list of all of the lies Jason Arday had accumulated. So we have B. Jason Arday, claim diagnosed autistic at 3, claim nonverbal at until 11, claim partial deafness in 1 ear and being taught to sign by yourself, claim couldn't read until 18, still leave school with 2 GCSEs, claim you joined the Pro Snooker Tour at 10, a year before you could even speak. I didn't know that! At 10, brother! Shut the fuck up! Claim you won so much at snooker your mom thought you were dealing drugs. Have the sports database show just 1 amateur event many years later with 0 prize money. Claim football academy and a pro career. Have Crystal Palace say there's no record. Have the real record show tier 8. Claim to have been on 7 Up, a series that first tracked 7-year-olds as they grew up. Have it first air 28 years before you were actually 7 years old. Have the BBC say you weren't even on it since you're not a time traveler. Claim youths at a bus stop beat you into a weeks-long coma. Claim you heard medics tell your parents to switch off life support. Claim you begged the judge to spare them. Claim they turned up years later as your students hug them, become godfather to one's child. Claim 30 marathons in 35 days in 2010, the last 9 on a broken leg swollen to twice its size. Add in an epileptic fit later to the later tellings. Tell the local paper you raised more than £100,000 since you were 17. Claim running 600 miles in 6 days as your final challenge when the men's record is 650. Claim it came at the same time as a stroke. Have no race time on record anywhere because why bother? Have nobody in the ultra world ever heard of you. Hand in a PhD on reflective practice with 100+ passages matching another student's 2009 thesis. Have 188 sentences come back identical or near identical, including copy editing errors. Match a second PhD and 2 published papers on top. Claim you did it in 2.5 years, working full-time with a brain tumor. Claim the tumor was cut out 2 weeks before the Viva. Claim a stroke after the surgery. Claim you turned up and remembered nothing at all. Claim 1 supervision meeting in the whole doctorate. Get the PhD anyway. Publish a paper claiming focus groups with 32 black and minority students. Have the quotes match an epidemiologist quotes. Have structure follow his paper too. Lift quotes into other papers and pass them off as interviews you conducted. Get a correction and not a retraction because, well, delete 18 of the 31 quotes. Get full chair at Glasgow. Tell TEDx crowd you've raised over £5 million by age 36. Claim you were once watched a teacher tell a boy who wanted to be a concert pianist to aim lower. I think more people need to hear this in current year. There are some people that do not understand just because you wish to achieve something does not mean you can. It sucks. Nobody likes hearing it. It's fucking awful. But you have to kind of be realistic sometimes. Retell sort in 2021 with the boy as a would-be astrophysicist. What? Retell it again in 2023 as your own experience and open a Channel 4 film with it. So it went from I watched a teacher tell a boy who wanted to be a concert pianist to aim lower to I watched a teacher tell a boy who wanted to be an astrophysicist to aim lower to actually I was that boy who wanted to be an astrophysicist and the teacher told me to aim lower. That's fucking crazy! Be youngest black professor in 900 years and at Cambridge. Get BBC radio series on loneliness. What? Claim 70% of Brits live below the breadline. Be voted #1 in the Disability Power 100. Collect honorary degrees from Solent, Angela Ruskin, St. Mary's, Westminster, and London South Bank. Say you raised millions for 70+ charities. Claim a Palgrave book called Being Young, Black, and Male. Have Palgrave say it was never published. Claim water points built for WaterAid across South America and Africa. Have WaterAid webpage titled Why We Don't Send Volunteers Abroad. List yourself as a visiting professor at Glasgow. Have Glasgow say nope. List yourself as a visiting professor at Ohio State Office of DEI. Have no record and have that office turn out to have shut down in 2025. Have Birkbeck say no record of your master's degree. Have Nelson Mandela University say the adjunct post has ended. Get a second paper corrected in 2024. Tell a funeral directors convention in New Orleans the Ultras raised £5 million alone, but no record again. Be named on more than $10 million in UKRI and NIHR grants. What? Write to a minister claiming knife threats, assault, spitting, rape, and death threats, plus banana, bullet, corrosive substances, and mutilated animals. Photograph none of it for some odd reason. Claim a masked man with a knife cornered you in the faculty twice. Show up on no CCTV either time. Tell nobody at the time. Claim police traced a severed pig's head to at your parents' house to a butcher who'd sold a whole hog that morning. Have the butcher say no officer ever came in. Have the Met call the whole tale categorically incorrect. Say you're experiencing a modern-day lynching on a podcast. Have the ASA make your speaking agency strip unbacked claims. Hire Carter Ruck and get the Times Higher Education to kill a finished story. Report their journalist to Scotland Yard for emailing you questions about your record. Have officers tell him to stop because your mental health was hurt. Report a retired professor too and have Devon and Cornwall decline to bother. Have the Met chief later admit we dropped the ball on that one. Get cleared by a panel you asked to weigh the war on critical race theory. Have 188 matching sentences called an honest and reasonable error. Do keynote on the playbook conservatives use to hunt black academics because beyond reproach. That is insane. I kind of want to listen to that keynote speech. I don't know if it's even possible to find, but I kind of want to hear that. This guy be like, yeah, I'm literally beyond criticism. I have ascended. You cannot be critical of me. Let's talk about the playbook conservatives use to hunt black academics. Have the Times find participant 11 in a study is 3 different people. Have the same quote come out of different mouths 25 times across 3 different papers. Have the sexes in your paper add up to 110%. Have false funding declarations. Have an outside expert say there is no question the plagiarism is extensive. Have a Cambridge autism professor send around urgent please sign anti-racism letter. Get 13,000 names and 3 Cambridge heads vouching for text that they never read. Have Cambridge call it a vile smear campaign. Blame autistic mimicry, a supervisor who left and one you never met. Call the campaign racially motivated. Say, what I am not is a liar. Turn 600 miles of margarine in 6 days into 12. I don't know why he said margarine instead of marathon, but you know what? He's written a lot here. Have Angela Ruskin edit your citation page the day the Cofnas piece dropped. Get Solent to delete the running claims. Have the TEDx video GC private. Have your Jesus College page quietly turn professorial fellow into fellow and a Liverpool Masters vanish. Have academics call for a regulator probe, and have the Office for Students decline to comment. Have Cambridge open a probe into your qualifications and honorary appointments. Have Jesus College open its own. Quit both on the spot. Put the letter out through the Good Law Project. Have the letter promise you'll return stronger and wiser. Have the letter come back 100% fucking AI. Have Jesus College drop its probe the moment you quit. Have the Good Law Project boss keep defending you, chalking it all up to neurodivergence. Have the ghost-written memoir come out in the US anyway after a 1.4 million preempt. Have the UK edition still set for August 27th. Have Cambridge order an outside audit of how you were ever hired in the first place. Have Durham and Glasgow open probes of their own. Commit suicide. Have people portray you as a victim? ? Holy fuck, that's so much. What sort of funeral costs £200,000? Is it gonna have a gold coffin on a rocket ship to Mars? In memory of Professor Jason Arday, someone set up a GoFundMe that has raised almost £200,000 for a guy whose life was nothing but lies. Built upon nothing but lies and fraud, and the people that enabled him because they only see skin color and not merit. This man has nothing. He was nothing. But the reason that I went through all of that, even though it was incredibly long and some of it was repetitive, especially after he killed himself, I knew exactly what would be coming. Mainstream articles would be filled with nothing but, this was a sad case of a man who took his own life due to racism and white people's need for the truth. This never should have happened. Everyone should have stopped talking about him. And wow, look at that. I'm so shocked. Cambridge Chancellor criticizes racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arday. The #1 insulation and defense from this kind of, psychotic rhetoric and propaganda is to actually consume the truth yourself. That's not saying listen to me saying things. Listen to the things that I read. Read them yourself. Sometimes I can fucking misunderstand things because I'm a retard. It happens. But I bring up every single one of my sources. I show off every single thing that I'm reading. And now we're going to have this entire media blitz frenzy of racism, and he's going to become another idolized canonical saint like Floyd of the fentanyl. We're going to have Arday of the fraudulent. Cambridge University's chancellor has criticized the racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arday, the professor who died after stepping down during a plagiarism row. Arday, who became the university's youngest black professor when appointed in 2023, had faced weeks of media coverage over plagiarism allegations and questions about his achievements. He denied the claims. Speaking publicly for the first time, Lord Chris Smith said academic integrity could be upheld while questioning Arday's treatment. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. In a sane society, this man would be booed off stage and then relieved of any kind of titles he has. Thousands gathered on Monday for a vigil organized by Stand Up to Racism in Trafalgar Square, where Labour MP Diane Abbott said Arday had been a subject of a vicious and bitter media campaign. Again, shut the fuck up. I don't really care, Margaret, what you make up in your own fucking head. None of that is real. Straight to the unemployment office. She said attacks by people who didn't believe a black man should be a Cambridge professor started as soon as he was appointed by the university in 2023. No! It was by people who were like, hey, some of his shit is kind of weird. That's kind of suspicious. Maybe we should ask some questions about this. But then every time they tried, they were given lawsuits and contacted by the police for harassment. This whole thing was racism disguised as goodliness. This whole thing was racism elevating someone who had no business being there and then calling people who called him out on that racist themselves. That word means nothing to these people. These people use it as a cudgel to beat you with. And it makes me so fucking pissed because it's like you have to play by these stupid fucking clown world rules because these are the people in charge of everything. The people who know nothing and do nothing but trying to pit everyone against each other. This was a campaign against all of us, she added. I want the tuberculosis! It comes after more than 90,000 people, including Abbott and Jamila Jamil, signed a Good Law Project petition seeking an inquiry into media coverage of Arday. That petition says his death followed 2 weeks of relentless harassment. It's not relentless harassment to unravel the lies that elevated this man to a position he did not deserve and should not fucking have. Why is this so hard for retards to understand? It's just like, I know they're not retards, and I know this is malicious, and I know that they need to elevate retards like Arday because that collapses the entire system, right? The whole Marxist tactic of elevating criminals above elevating regular people. You punish the regular people with the rules that were built to punish the criminals, and nobody will take you to task because everyone is afraid of the magic words that you use to shame them. I know, I understand, but I'm fucking losing my mind, chat. I'm so fucking mad at this. It's so fucking predictable and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can fucking do but sit here and seethe. Because these are the people who are in control of shit. And anyone on our side just refuses to do anything. They're just like, well, the other people in power might call me a racist and so I can't do anything about it. You're gonna have to suffer. I'm so fucking tired. In a statement following the professor's death, Lord Smith said, I do believe it is possible to hold two principles at the same time, to believe in the importance of academic integrity, and where criticisms of plagiarism arise about any academic, whoever they are, ensure that they are rigorously investigated. And also to refuse to join in a racist feeding frenzy over a particular academic. What is fucking racist about it? Literally no one criticizing this guy has been like, he can't be there because he's black. They've just been like, all of you guys are elevating him because he's black, but look at all of this fraud. Look at all of these lies. And their response is, no, I won't look at it. You're just racist. It's all so fucking tiresome. This guy is trying to use weasel wording, right? Where he's like, oh, it's possible to hold two principles at the same time. Yes, it is. But your two principles are diametrically opposed to one another when any kind of like questioning the academic integrity and the criticisms of his plagiarism and his copying and his fucking just making the shit fucking up. All of that has been called racist. These are not compatible. There was no racist feeding frenzy. You're calling the act of asking about academic integrity racist. That is what you people are doing. Lord whatever the fuck. Lord Smith's role at Cambridge is largely ceremonial, with the day-to-day running of the university falling to Vice Chancellor Professor Deborah Prentice. The peer is an ex-Labour MP and a Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, as well as a former chairman of the Environment Agency. Cambridge University initially said claims of plagiarism regarding Arday's thesis and some journal publications have been investigated by Liverpool John Moores University and the journals in question. LJMU, which awarded Arday his PhD in 2015, concluded that he had not plagiarized his work. This was their original claim, because they didn't even fucking bother investigating it. We investigated ourselves and find we did nothing wrong. Haha tee. And then afterwards, they were like, oh, well, here's a bunch of shit that needs changing, by the way. Here's another investigation. Oops, he killed himself. Everybody who's talking about him now is just a racist. Shut the fuck up. Is the final boss of Marxist brain rot. Objective truth isn't real, and if you assert facts, you are a racist. Yeah, it's fucking obnoxious. It's fucking obnoxious, and I am angry. I'm actually angry reading this shit. Because if we lived in a normal world, this man wouldn't have all these articles about it. This man wouldn't even be dead. This man would still be alive, doing something else. Because he wouldn't have been elevated to a position he didn't deserve. He wouldn't have been pushed into PhD courses. He wouldn't have been a professor at Cambridge. That's not... He doesn't get that just because he's black. And that's what these people are saying he should. They're saying, don't look at the fraud, don't look at the lies. His skin color means he belongs here. And that's fucked up. That's incredibly fucked up. Stocking shelves for a pittance on the overnights. It's like he would still be alive. None of these articles would exist. Because if he was treated like he should be treated, like every other fucking person going through the same program, they would have found out that he was plagiarizing and fraudulent from the very fucking beginning, and he never would have gotten a master's, he never would have gotten his PhD, he never would have been given a professorship, he never would have been given this opportunity to lie about all of his marathon exploits on a broken leg or whatever the fuck. Everyone would have just been ignoring him. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here if we had sane people in positions of power. Last week, Cambridge announced an independent investigation into his appointment. Arday, 41, was found dead in an address in Battersea, South London on Friday. He had resigned as a Cambridge professor of sociology of education on August 5th, but he stressed that his resignation should not be mistaken for an acceptance of the narratives that have surrounded him. Breaking news! A habitual liar is lying once again! Wow, who could have seen that coming? Downing Street declined to say at this stage whether Andy Burnham was considering an inquiry into Arday's death, reiterating that it was a moment for reflection, and that it was right for the usual processes like an inquest to conclude. An investigation will be carried out to determine Arday's cause of death, which could take several weeks, the London Inner South Corners Court has said. Once complete and following any submissions from Arday's family, the coroner will confirm if an inquest will take place. Sir James cleverly said he was angry about what happened to Arday, and the university establishment, not just Cambridge, should have done the robust due diligence and checking that should happen with any senior academic appointment. Thank you, Sir James cleverly, for saying it in a much more calm manner than I fucking did. Fucking retard idiots, do your fucking job. Oh wait, you can't, because you're brain-rotted Marxist who can't create anything, only destroy. Speaking to the BBC's Today program on Monday, the Shadow Housing Secretary said he felt Arday was used as bragging rights by some universities, and that people spoke of his age and ethnicity rather than his talent. They did! Every single article we've read about him, in the same way that every single article about DEI references the murder of George Floyd has changed so much for us, every single article about this guy is, he became the university's youngest black professor. That's all they care about. That's all they've ever cared about. Isn't it so inclusive of look at our pet black who shouldn't be here. Aren't we wonderful and progressive people? Look at him. Oh, he killed himself? You need to shut up. You're a racist. I think it was part of the reason that he was lifted so high so quickly. And then when the scrutiny did come, external to universities, his reputation had so far to fall. I think it was unfair on him. And I think it's been a terrible, terrible situation. Yes. Thank you, Shadow Housing Secretary, for being a sane individual. Sir James, who was Britain's first black Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary, said much of the coverage surrounding Arday was quite possibly motivated by racism. Someone look into that guy. How did he get elected? Frauds are going to protect other frauds, because if they don't, people could find out they're fraudulent. But to me, if you're defending a fraud, you should be looked into. Anything you claim is now suspect. Why are you defending a fraud? The questions over plagiarism were legitimate regardless of motivation. Oh, so the plagiarism questions were legitimate despite being motivated by racism. I'm so fucking sick of these people. Nothing I read in my 2 streams had anyone acting in a racist manner toward Arday. Did they see like a Twitter comment and then shit their fucking pants? Like, I don't fucking... Meanwhile, when Housing Minister Matthew Pennycock... I'm gonna pull the pennycock as the ejaculation lever. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook was questioned over whether the press behaved poorly. He echoed the comments by the Prime Minister, that it was not the time to rush to judgment on this. I do think the events leading up to his death raised questions about the duty of care and the nature of modern media scrutiny, but I don't think that the time is now to get into a debate about those. I certainly don't intend to sit here and opine on them myself. Why is it time? Why is it time to have a discussion and raise questions about modern media scrutiny instead of raising questions about the dumb fucking bitches who hired him in the first place? The dumb white Marxist women using him as a pet. Why is that not the question that we have here? Not diagnosed, but I'm too autistic to live in a world where you have to lie in order to achieve anything. I genuinely hate the inversion of if you lie and the more you lie, the more you're rewarded. And any kind of honesty gets you scrutinized as a liar anyways, so you have no incentive to be honest and every incentive to lie if lying is both rewarded and you're scrutinized regardless. You know? It's just like, I fucking hate it so fucking much. You think they want to avoid the fact that they basically set a guy up to fail, resulting in his death? That is the entirety of DEI. Elevating people who have no business being in positions to those positions, and then crying racism, sexism, misogyny, what the fuck ever at anyone who dares to point out, hey, this person's not qualified. And it's how you get a complete inversion of meritocracy, and everyone gets to be finally equal in a utopia of poverty and horror. Penny Cook added that it was time to reflect and think compassionately about how we got into the situation, which is desperately, desperately sad one. Yeah, that's not gonna happen, Mr. Pennycock. It's not gonna happen. Marxists are incapable of doing that. The chair of the NHS Confederation, who signed the letter calling for a public inquiry, said focus should be turned on the press rather than social media because self-regulation totally failed in the case of Arday. No! It should be turned on the people who hired him! He was given every reason to not only continue lying, but making greater and greater lies. Because every time he lied, he got rewarded. He got a pat on the head, he got a nice little treat, and he got another fucking certificate to lie about. It should be turned on the institutions, on the people who hired him. Lord Victor Adewobelewe told BBC's Radio 4 World at one program, people were warned in advance this pursuit risked his life and the warnings were ignored. It is true we live in a world of social media where people say what they like and can pursue people as much as they want. In this case, I'm pointing at the press. They failed. I don't know who the fuck Lord Victor Adewobelewe is, but maybe he should also be looked into if he's defending a fraud and wanting to go after the press for outing the fraud as a fraud. When justice is looked upon with ire and criminals are supported as heroes, you no longer have a functioning society. You have already collapsed and you are living in the rubble of a better people at that point. The row first erupted after another academic, self-defined race realist Nathan Cofnas, who was sacked from his Cambridge role in 2024, said he found numerous instances of plagiarism in the professor's work. Who the fuck cares? I don't care if Nathan Cofnas believes in the interdimensional traveling racist elves that scream the N-word at anyone who happens to take DMT that's not white. I don't care. He could believe that Santa Claus is real and kidnaps children to build them into toys. It doesn't fucking matter. If he actually found evidence, which he did, we read the article, of this guy plagiarizing and being fraudulent, that is what should be focused on. The work should stand on its own two legs, but it doesn't, because that is not how Marxists operate. If someone who says something you don't like says something, even if that thing is real and you might agree with it, you must disagree. You must say that it is false, and not only is it false, it is offensive and should not be spoken by anyone else. It is absurd. You should be able to look at someone, even if you don't like them, and say, oh, this might be a good point. I don't like the other things they say, but they have a point with this fucking thing. That is how normal people fucking operate. Cofnas' post had been terminated amid a backlash to his view that under a true meritocracy, black people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sports and entertainment. Well, how would we know? Right? Like, he can have that opinion. He can have that opinion. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it, and that doesn't mean you agree with it if you agree with him outing fraud of somebody else. Like, the two things have no correlation to one another. He could be right. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's wrong. We don't know, because we don't live in that world. We don't live in the world that promotes meritocracy. We live in a world that promotes people based on immutable characteristics. Cambridge had celebrated Arday's appointment as a young black professor, one of a tiny invisible minority in academia. Only 1% of professors in the UK universities are black, making each appointment hugely significant. It shouldn't be hugely significant. You should elevate people based on the things that they do, not based on their skin color. That's insane. I would not want to be, like, celebrated as the first woman to do something. I would just want to be celebrated for doing the thing. On Sunday, more than 200 people attended a vigil at Cambridge that was organized by Arday's postdoctoral students. And I mean, they should. They should have vigils. Because it is sad that a man took his life instead of facing accountability. And then after taking his life, everyone who encouraged him along this path obviously isn't going to take accountability and just calling everyone racist. Unfair to him, forget being elevated. If his degrees weren't real, and they weren't, he shouldn't have even been hired as a professor. He only had a high school education, if even that, which is unconfirmed. Yeah, true. It's confirmed that he had 2 GCSEs. I don't know how many you usually have. I don't know exactly how the British school system works, but he had 2 GCSEs, and that was it. Those are the only things that could have been verified of everything that he said. Like, We can't even verify anything about his supposed autism or his supposed illiteracy until 18. Nothing is verifiable. Everything has been fraudulent.